setting up for a drone ship landing at T plus 8 minutes and 17 seconds. And if you're noticing over these last several launches going back a few weeks, maybe a couple months at this point, you're noticing that the timeline is starting to get somewhat truncated. It's more possible to do with repeat launches with similar flight profiles, as we see, of course, with all the Starlink missions going to the 6th shell of the Starlink constellation. T plus 8 minutes and 39 seconds will be second stage engine cutoff for SECO 1, followed by a coast phase, which wraps up at T plus 54 minutes and 11 seconds. There will be a quick 1 second burn of that Merlin vacuum engine, setting up for the Starlink satellites to deploy at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 20 seconds. We're now at T minus 21 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. We are just about a minute away from the start of the big vent again. That venting process that we see as the feed lines are chilled prior to second stage liquid oxygen load at T minus 16 minutes. Tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet. It began launching over at Pad 39A back on November 26th of 2022. And for those that are keeping an eagle eye out on these dates, they are based off of the launch time in UTC. So just putting that caveat out here. That Dragon launch was CRS-26, or the Commercial Resupply Services mission for SpaceX, sending Cargo Dragon spacecraft up to the International Space Station with more than 7,700 pounds of science and cargo in tow. Next mission was one of SpaceX's 3 dedicated flights, sending a batch of the OneWeb satellites up to orbit. OneWeb turned to SpaceX as a launch provider for a similar reason that the European Commission turned to SpaceX for its Galileo satellites last night, that being with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the termination of the use of the Soyuz rocket to launch the OneWeb satellites. They opted for 3 flights on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and 2 launches from India and with ISRO. In fact, these satellites are also manufactured right here on Merritt Island at the Airbus OneWeb satellite facility, not too far from Space Florida's spot, across from the Blue Origin factory where they manufacture New Glenn. Third flight of this booster was a Starlink mission that was back on February 27th, 2023, lifting off from Pad 40, booster landing on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. That was followed up on April 7th when this booster supported the Intelsat 40E launch. This is a communications satellite that also included a NASA-hosted payload called the Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollution, abbreviated to the acronym TEMPO. It's a UV visible spectrometer that monitors air pollutants hourly across North America. It can measure pollutants during the daytime like ozone, sulfur dioxide, and formaldehyde, and at night it can measure light pollution down to a resolution of about 4 square miles. Launches 5 through 8 have all been Starlink missions. Those were Starlink 6-3 on May 19th of 2023, Starlink 6-6 on July 24th, 6-14 on September 9th, and 6- I was getting a little ahead of myself there, 6-14 on the 9th. Starlink 6-21 on October 5th. The 9th launch on November 12th, 2023, carried the O3B mPOWER 5 and 6 satellites up to medium Earth orbit on behalf of SES. It was followed by the launch of the Ovzon 3 satellite on January 3rd, 2024. Launch number 11, Starlink satellites on Starlink 6-40 on February 29th on Leap Day. And most recently, back on March 30th, was the launch of the Eutelsat 36D communications satellite, lifting off from this very pad and landing on the exact same drone ship that it will be landing. You're seeing the clamp arms opening up here on the payload fairing, underneath the payload fairing. Transporter erector reclining a degree and a half away from the vehicle, now less than 3.5 minutes away from liftoff. Taking a look at the wide view here. Still a very idyllic day for a launch, as weather seems to be cooperating quite nicely. Less than 3 minutes to liftoff.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Hear that call out for stage 1 LOX load complete. Coming up in about 30 seconds, the same will be true on the second stage, at which point the Falcon 9 will be fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. Very much appreciate the more than 43,000 of you who are joining with us live this evening. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button in the last 2 minutes of the count so more folks can find their way into this live coverage, coming just in the nick of time.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call out, the Falcon 9 is fully fueled, ready for flight. That venting you're seeing there, which will bring up this view from Chuck Briggs. You can see it a little bit more clearly. Those are the ground gas closeouts. Should hear a call out for that momentarily.
Ground gas closeouts.
There you hear that call. Want to squeeze in just a couple more super chats while we have a second here. B-Man with a $5 super chat. Thank you, B-Man. Grew up on the Space Coast. Love to be here for the streams. Jenny Lynn with a super chat. Thank you, Jenny. Hello, Florida, watching from Davenport. And Biscuits for the win with a 65 SEK super
Falcon
chat.
9 is in startup.
First time actually catching one of these launches live. It's just amazing what y'all are capable of. Big love from Sweden. And with that, we will come back to the super chats on the other side of the mission, but we are now 40 seconds away from liftoff. So let's keep our focus on the mission, as we now have a go for launch from the SpaceX launch director. Less than 30 seconds now until the liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. 20 seconds and counting. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-54 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Falcon 9 soaring high above the Florida Space Coast here. Now 30 seconds into the mission, let's listen to the roar of those 9 Merlin 1D engines. Now a little more than a minute into flight. All moving nominally with the mission so far. Falcon 9 about to pass through max Q at the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
Max Q.
You hear that call out for max Q. Some great tracking views. This from our Adam Bernstein here at the press site. This from Chuck Briggs.
MVAC chill has started.
And finally, Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. That call out for MVAC chill, they're thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine prior to its burn. Now, coming up in less than a minute, we'll see a few different events in rapid succession. At T plus 2 minutes and 26 seconds will be first stage main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. Now, more than 2 minutes into flight. Five seconds to Miko. There you see Miko. Stage
Main
separation.
engine cutoff.
And there's that burn.
Stage separation confirmed. MVAC ignition.
It's a great onboard camera views from the Falcon 9 first and second stage. To the left here, these views from Pete Carson's Max Q Productions, following the track of that Falcon 9 upper stage with the payload fairings about to jettison. And there they go. As they turn, you can see some nice glints just like that.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Reflecting off the setting sun over Florida. And those Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission. The payload fairings, now that they have served their usefulness on this flight, will float down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under parachutes, where they will be recovered by the vessel Doug. Turning our attention to the Falcon 9 first stage. Looks like both Pete and Chuck have it in their view here. Coming up on 4 minutes into flight. The next milestone we're expecting is at T plus 6 minutes and 9 seconds when that first stage entry burn will begin. Assuming we don't get obscured by some errant clouds here. Less than 2 minutes from now, we should be able to bring you views of that entry burn beginning, assuming all continues to go well. Those occasional puffs that you're seeing somewhat on our live pictures here from the ground tracker cameras, as well as from the onboard camera views in the top right-hand corner box of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Those are the cold gas thrusters on the Falcon 9 first stage, part of the booster's attitude control system to help orient the rocket as it makes its way down towards the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Some nice views of Earth from the Falcon 9's second stage cameras. Now less than 20 seconds away from the start of that first stage entry burn. Engine burn is starting now in real time. We'll see if we can catch that on our tracking cameras. We'll bring that to you if we can.
Stage 1 FTS is safed.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Maybe just a bit too bright to see against an otherwise bright sky here. Fortunately, we've got the onboard camera view from SpaceX's Falcon 9 first stage. There may also be some clouds between us and the booster.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Stage 2 FTS is safed.
Some good call-outs from SpaceX, and you can see the speed of the first stage booster is dropping rapidly as it continues to make its way down towards the drone ship. Speed continuing to pick up on the upper stage, though, as the Merlin vacuum engine continues its burn. Now cruising at about 160 kilometers in altitude. And we are now just about 30 seconds away from the start of the first stage landing burn.
Stage 1 transonic.
With that call out, the booster is traveling below the speed of sound, again continuing its slowdown as it makes its way towards the booster. The drag of the atmosphere helping that slowing process as well.
Stage 1 landing burn.
There you can see the start of the landing.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Should see some views of that drone ship coming up on the right in just a moment.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And with that,
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
we have a good landing of the Falcon 9 first stage booster at 1076, 13 times up, 13 times down.
And back shutdown.
Waiting for confirmation of the orbital insertion. While we didn't hear that call out before SpaceX ended its stream, MVAC shutdown usually precedes a good orbital insertion, so unless we get word from SpaceX to the contrary, for now we will assume that it has entered into a good coast phase. That coasting will last until T plus 54 minutes and 11 seconds, at which point there will be a quick 1-second burn of the Falcon 9's upper stage engine, setting it for Starlink satellite deployment at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 20 seconds.